Do you hear it? The echoes of the past, the whispers of forgotten truths, fragments of memories lost in the shadows. Welcome to BRAINROT, Echoes, where we bring you stories long buried, unravel mysteries cloaked by time, and guide you through the darkest corners of the mind and the universe. Each video is more than just content. It's an echo resonating deep within, urging you to question, to wonder, to explore. Backend index pointing right, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us in listening to the echoes the world tried to silence. The encounter with the coffee maker. Admiral Xylos, commander of the mighty Xylon exploration fleet, looked at the main screen. Commander Velix, his voice resonated deeply. We have completed our scan of Sector 4. 32 inhabited worlds. Minimal defensive capabilities. Standard conquest time estimate, 60 standard cycles. Velix, the chief commander, nodded. 60 cycles, Admiral. Almost insulting. These newer species make it all too easy. The last world they'd conquered, a backwater called Cthar Prime, had endured all of 5 cycles before surrendering. Their planetary shields had been about as effective as tissue paper in a hurricane. Excellent, Commander Velix. Deployment. Begin campaign. Admiral. A comms officer cut in, his voice unusually strained. We have an irregularity. Irregularity. That was a word that made Xylos' secondary hearts skip a beat. In 800 cycles of conquest, irregularity usually meant someone had miscounted the enemy's ships. There were more, or miscalculated their weapons capacity. They were stronger. Both scenarios typically resulted in slightly longer conquest times and significantly more paperwork. Define irregularity, Commander, Xylos ordered. A single vessel has positioned itself between our fleet and the target system, sir. It's blocking our path. Xylos' 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of profound confusion that he tried to keep hidden from his bridge crew. In all his cycles of military service, no one had ever simply stood in the way. It wasn't a tactic covered in any of their military doctrines. One vessel? What class? What species? Unknown class, sir. But the species. Velix's own mandibles clicked uncertainly. The database identifies them as human. A collective silence fell over the bridge. Not the comfortable silence of a well-oiled military machine, but the awkward silence that happens when someone mentions that weird cousin nobody talks about at family reunions. Humans. Of course it had to be humans. Pull up their file, Xylos ordered, though he already had a sinking feeling about what he'd find. The holographic display materialized above the command console, and there it was, the human species profile. Xylos had seen it before, naturally, part of his standard briefings, but he never paid it much attention. Why would he? According to the file, humans were a relatively young species, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Their technology was described as adequate, but unremarkable. Their military was small, but enthusiastic. Their diplomatic approach was labeled as confusing and contradictory. What the file didn't mention, because honestly, who would think to include this, was that humans had a disturbing tendency to do things that made absolutely no tactical sense. Sir, incoming transmission from the human vessel. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human male seated in what appeared to be a captain's chair. He looked exactly like every other human Xylos had seen in the files. Bipedal, covered in that strange, flexible skin, with hair growing only on specific parts of his head. What struck Xylos immediately was the human's expression, or rather, the complete lack of concern in it. Afternoon, the human said casually, as if he were greeting a neighbor over a fence rather than addressing the most feared military force in 3 galactic sectors. Captain Elias Thorne, Starship Infinite Joy. Beautiful day for a space battle, isn't it? Xylos stared. In 800 cycles of conquest, no one had ever opened diplomatic contact by commenting on the weather, especially not when there was no weather in space. I am Admiral Xylos of the Xylon Imperial Fleet, he replied, falling back on standard protocol, because nothing about this situation was covered in the manual. You are obstructing the path of a legitimate military operation. Remove your vessel or be destroyed. Captain Thorne, Elias, apparently, because humans were informal about everything, leaned back in his chair and actually smiled. Smiled as if the Admiral had just told him a mildly amusing joke. Yeah, see, here's the thing about that, Elias said. Xylos noticed he was holding what appeared to be a steaming beverage. Who drinks hot liquids during a military confrontation? Those 32 worlds you're planning to conquer, 3 of them have trade agreements with Earth. Nothing major, mind you, some agricultural exports, a few technological exchanges, cultural stuff, but paperwork is paperwork, you know? I failed to see the relevance. Well, the relevant bit is that we've got legal obligations, treaties, very boring stuff, really, but our lawyers get cranky when we ignore international law. And trust me, you don't want to deal with cranky human lawyers. Xylos felt a headache building behind his primary eyes. Are you suggesting that your single vessel intends to prevent the conquest of 32 worlds because of paperwork? Oh, heavens no! Elias laughed, and the sound was truly amused. That would be ridiculous. No, I'm here because it's the right thing to do. The paperwork is just a bonus. This was rapidly becoming the strangest military encounter of Xylos' career. Captain Thorne, I command a fleet of 900 vessels. You have 1 ship. Basic mathematics suggests that you are severely outmatched. Probably, Elias agreed cheerfully. But you know what they say, it's not the size of the ship, it's the motion of the ocean. Or in this case, the motion of the, well, space, I guess. That metaphor works better on planets. Commander Valix leaned over to Xylos' station. Sir, should we simply destroy them and continue with the operation? It was a reasonable suggestion. 1 human ship, no matter how oddly commanded, couldn't possibly pose a threat to their fleet. But something nagged at Xylos' mind. A memory from his tactical training about engaging unknown forces. Captain Thorne, Xylos said slowly, what exactly do you think you can accomplish here? Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Elias took another sip of his beverage. See, the thing about humans, and I realize this might not be in your files, is that we have this terrible habit of doing stupid things for good reasons. It's gotten us in trouble more times than I can count, but it's also gotten us out of trouble just as often. That is not an answer. Sure it is. You're just not listening to what I'm actually saying. Elias's expression got slightly more serious, though he still looked remarkably relaxed for someone facing overwhelming odds. Admiral, how many species have you conquered in your career? 237 distinct civilizations. And how many of them put up a real fight? Xylos paused. It was an odd question, and one that made him truly think. Perhaps 20. Most species surrendered once they realized the futility of resistance. Right? Because they're smart. They run the numbers, see they can't win, and make the logical choice. Elias nodded approvingly. Very sensible, very reasonable. Not human. Are you implying that humans are unreasonable? Oh, Admiral, we're absolutely unreasonable. It's practically our defining characteristic. We do things like climb mountains because they're there, dive to the bottom of oceans just to see what's down there, and strap ourselves to controlled explosions to visit our moon. Reasonable species don't do that sort of thing. Xylos was beginning to understand why the human diplomatic file was labeled as confusing and contradictory. Furthermore, Elias continued, warming to his topic, we have this deeply irritating tendency to bite off more than we can chew and then somehow manage to swallow it anyway. Our entire history is full of people who should have died horribly, but didn't because they were too stubborn to realize they were beaten. Captain, this conversation is fascinating. But, for instance, Elias interrupted smoothly. There was this human named Leonidas who once held off an entire army with just 300 soldiers. Died in the end, naturally, but he made his point. Or take Joan of Arc. Teenage peasant girl who convinced a king to let her lead his army. Completely insane, of course, but it worked. Historical anecdotes are irrelevant to your current situation. Are they? Because I'm starting to think you don't really understand what you're dealing with here. Commander Vielix was making increasingly agitated clicking sounds. Sir, we should simply eliminate this vessel and proceed. We're wasting time. But Xylos held up one of his four hands. Something about this human's calm confidence was setting off alarm bells in his tactical mind. In his experience, there were two types of beings who remained calm in the face of overwhelming force. Those who were too stupid to understand their situation, and those who knew something you didn't. Captain Thorne didn't strike him as stupid. Captain, Xylos said carefully, are you attempting to delay us for some strategic purpose? Nope. Like I said, I'm here because it's the right thing to do. Those worlds you want to conquer, they've got people on them. Families, kids, entire civilizations with art and music and literature, and really excellent recipes for what I'm told are fantastic soup-equivalent dishes. This is war, Captain. Casualties are inevitable. See, that's where we disagree. Elias's voice remained conversational, but there was something steel-hard underneath it now. I don't accept that disasters are inevitable. I think they're a choice. And I think you've been making the wrong choice for a very long time. One ship, Captain. You have one ship. Yes, but it's a very nice ship. And more importantly, it's a human ship. The way he said it made Xylos' skin crawl in a way he didn't completely understand. Meaning we built it to human specifications. Human engineering. Human tactical thinking. Elias smiled again. But this time, it wasn't entirely pleasant. Admiral, has anyone ever told you about human military doctrine? Your military is described as small, but enthusiastic. Oh, it is definitely enthusiastic. But the thing about human military thinking is that we approach warfare differently than most species. See, most rational species try to win battles efficiently. Minimal casualties, maximum effect, get the job done, and go home for dinner. That is the sensible approach. Absolutely, very logical. Unfortunately, humans aren't particularly interested in being logical when people are trying to kill us. We're more interested in making sure that anyone who attacks us regrets it so thoroughly that their great-grandchildren wake up in cold sweats. Xylos felt his secondary hearts skip again. That's vindictive. We prefer the term thoroughly, but yes, we could be vindictive. We hold grudges like other species hold trade agreements, very carefully and for a very long time. Captain Thorne, threats will not. Oh, I'm not threatening you, Admiral. I'm trying to educate you. There's a difference. Elias leaned forward slightly. See, when humans build a warship, we don't just think about how to make it fight well. We think about how to make it hurt the enemy so badly that they never want to fight us again. Standard military doctrine is that. Is it? Because most species, when they design weapons, they think about efficiency. Clean kills, minimal collateral damage, surgical strikes. Very civilized. Elias's smile broadened. Humans think about making the other guy's friends afraid to follow his example. Commander Vielix was now clicking his mandibles in what Xylos recognized as serious agitation. Sir, this human is clearly attempting psychological warfare. We should eliminate him and proceed. I agree with your commander, Elias said pleasantly, apparently having heard the exchange. You should absolutely attack me. In fact, I encourage it because that's going to make what happens next so much more interesting for everyone involved. What happens next, Xylos said with growing irritation, is that my fleet destroys your ship and continues with our conquest schedule. Probably. But see, that's the beauty of human military thinking. We don't plan for victory. We plan for what happens after we lose. That statement was so tactically nonsensical that Xylos almost laughed. You plan for defeat, we plan for revenge. Very different thing. Elias took another sip of his beverage. Admiral, when you destroy my ship, do you know what's going to happen? The operation will proceed as scheduled. Well, yes. In the short term, you'll conquer those 32 worlds, add them to your empire, file your paperwork, maybe get accommodations from your superiors. Standard Tuesday for the XY fleet. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. About 48 hours after you vaporize the infinite joy, a very polite message is going to arrive at every major news outlet, government building, and military installation in human space. It's going to contain detailed sensor logs of this entire encounter, including high-resolution footage of a single human ship attempting to protect innocent worlds from conquest. Xylos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. You're recording this? Oh, Admiral, I'm broadcasting this live feed to half a dozen human news networks. Hi, Mom. Danny waved at the camera with his free hand. But don't worry, the really good footage won't be released until after you kill me. Posthumous testimony is so much more dramatic, don't you think? This is irregular. It gets better. See, along with the footage, that message is going to include the location of every Xylon military installation our intelligence services have been able to identify over the past few decades. Complete defensive analyses, supply chain information, patrol schedules, the works. Impossible. Human intelligence capabilities are limited. Are they? Funny thing about humans, Admiral, we're natural-born spies. We're curious about everything. We ask too many questions, and we have this terrible habit of remembering things that other people would prefer we forget. Plus, we're really good at making friends with the staff. Xylos was beginning to feel distinctly uncomfortable. Even if that were true, the human military lacked the capability to threaten Xylon installations. Today, sure. But here's the thing about humans and military capability. We scale up really fast when we're motivated. Right now, we've got a small but enthusiastic military, like your files say. But if you broadcast footage of an Xylon fleet destroying a lone human ship that was trying to protect innocent civilians, Elias's smile became positively predatory. Well, let's just say that small but enthusiastic can become large and absolutely furious faster than you might think. You're bluffing. Am I, Admiral? Has anyone ever told you about World War II? I'm not familiar with human historical conflicts. Oh, you should be. Fascinating stuff. See, there was this country called Japan, and they made the tactical decision to launch a surprise attack on another country called the United States. Perfectly reasonable military thinking. Catch the enemy off guard, destroy their Pacific fleet, force them to negotiate. Xylos waited. Though he was beginning to suspect, he didn't want to hear the rest of this story. The attack was completely successful. Destroyed most of the American Pacific fleet, killed thousands of people, achieved all their tactical objectives. Textbook military operation. And 4 years later, the United States dropped 2 artificial suns on Japan and ended the war. The bridge fell completely silent, except for the low hum of ship systems. Artificial suns? Nuclear weapons. Took matter and converted it directly to energy. City-killing weapons that we invented specifically because we were angry about that surprise. Elias's tone remained conversational, but there was something cold in his eyes. Now see, that's the thing about motivating humans, Admiral. We don't just get even. We get creative. Nuclear weapons are banned by 17 different galactic treaties. Are they? How interesting. I don't recall humans signing any of those treaties. Elias tilted his head thoughtfully. Of course, we've never needed to use nuclear weapons in space. Turns out there are much more effective ways to hurt people when you're not limited by planetary atmospheres. Such as, well, for instance, did you know that if you accelerate a chunk of iron to about 90% of light speed, it hits with the force of a small nuclear weapon? Completely legal under galactic law. It's just kinetic energy, after all. No radiation, no fallout, just a really big boom. Xylos' tactical mind was now working overtime. Relativistic kinetic weapons were theorized possible, but the engineering challenges were enormous. The power requirements alone. The energy costs would be prohibitive. Would they? See, that's another thing about humans. We're really good at solving engineering problems when we're sufficiently motivated. And nothing motivates human engineers quite like the prospect of building bigger and better ways to hurt people who have hurt us. Captain Thorne, you're attempting to frighten me with theoretical weapons. Am I, Admiral? How long do you think it takes to accelerate a projectile to 90% of light speed? Xylos' computers ran the calculations automatically, assuming sufficient power generation. Approximately 47 standard cycles. Interesting. So if hypothetically humans had started construction on such a weapon right around the time we first encountered the Xylon Empire, the Admiral's primary and secondary hearts both skipped a beat. Humans had first made contact with Xylon forces 63 cycles ago. You're lying. Am I? Tell me, Admiral, what do you know about human industrial capacity? Your manufacturing capabilities are adequate but limited. Adequate but limited, right? Elias laughed, and the sound was truly amused. You know, our economists have a term for what happens to human industrial capacity during wartime. We call it total war production. It's when we stop making consumer goods and start making weapons. Just weapons. Nothing but weapons. All species increase military production during wartime. Do they? Because during World War II, humans increased our military production by roughly 4,000%. 4,000%, Admiral. We went from making 10,000 tanks a year to making 50,000 tanks a year. We built ships faster than the enemy could sink them. We manufactured bullets faster than our soldiers could fire them. Xylos was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. A 4,000% increase in production capacity was unsettling. Even if that's true, human population centers are known. Xylon forces could target your industrial. Could they, Admiral? How many human worlds do you think there are? According to our intelligence, approximately 400 settled systems. 400, interesting number. Elias took another sip of his beverage. Tell me, when was the last time your intelligence services updated that count? Intelligence estimates are updated regularly. Are they? Because humans have been very busy over the past few decades. See, we have this terrible habit of spreading out, exploring, colonizing, building new homes in places other people haven't thought to look. Expansion requires significant resources and time. Does it, Admiral? Are you familiar with the concept of generation ships? Xylos was, and he was beginning to see where this was going. Generation ships were vessels designed for century-long journeys to distant star systems. Most species consider them impractical because of the enormous commitment of resources and population required. Generation ships are inefficient methods of colonization. Inefficient, sure, but humans don't really care about efficiency when we're trying to make sure our species survives. See, we learned a long time ago that putting all your eggs in one basket is a really good way to lose all your eggs. How many? Xylos asked quietly. How many what? How many human colonies are there, really? Elias's smile was answer enough, but he provided one anyway. Let's just say that your intelligence services are very, very bad at counting. Commander Valix leaned over again. Sir, this is clear psychological warfare, human deception tactics. We should not allow. Commander, Xylos said quietly. Pull up the long-range sensor readings from the past 48 standard cycles. Sir, do it. Valix's mandibles clicked uncertainly, but he complied. The sensor data appeared on a secondary display, showing the normal traffic of faster-than-light vessels moving through nearby systems. Normal background traffic. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening, which was Xylos realized exactly what was wrong. Commander, how many FDL signatures should we be detecting in this sector at any given time, based on known shipping routes and standard commercial traffic? Approximately 40 to 60 signatures, sir. And how many are we currently detecting? Valix, check the displays. 37, sir. Within normal parameters. No, Xylos said slowly. It's not. Because the thing about traffic was that it was supposed to be random. Ships appearing and disappearing, moving through and out of FTL, following various routes to various destinations. Random patterns. The signatures they were detecting weren't random. They were waiting. Captain Thorne, Xylos said carefully, those FDL signatures we're detecting, are they human vessels? Some of them. Mixed fleet, actually. Humans, Alarians, Centauri Collective, even a few Cthar ships. Amazing what you can accomplish when you make friends instead of enemies. How many ships in this sector? Oh, about 300, give or take. The bridge fell silent again. 300 ships was more than a third the size of Xylos's own fleet. and they'd somehow managed to get into position without being detected until now. They're cloaked. Not cloaked, just quiet. See, when you make friends with the locals, they teach you things like how to mask FTL signatures, how to use stellar phenomena to hide sensor readings, how to move large fleets without being noticed. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors were designed to detect XY ships, moving in attack formations, military-grade engines, weapons charging. These ships aren't doing any of that. They're just existing quietly. Xylos' tactical mind was racing now. 300 ships of unknown capability positioned throughout the sector with the element of surprise. Even if they were inferior to XY vessels individually, numbers could make up for a lot of tactical disadvantages. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Nothing dramatic. Just turn around and go home. Find something else to do with your time. Take up hobbies. Learn to paint. I hear watercolors are very soothing. We cannot simply abandon our conquest schedule." Why not? The question was so simple, so direct, that it actually caught Xylos off guard. Why couldn't they abandon their conquest schedule? The Empire requires expansion, resources, territory. Does it, Admiral? What percentage of XY territory is actually inhabited? That's classified information. Is it? Because our intelligence suggests it's somewhere around 12%. 12%, Admiral. You've got empty worlds scattered across half the galaxy, and you're conquering more worlds to get what? Exactly. Xylos didn't have a good answer for that. Conquest was simply what the Empire did. It was their purpose, their identity, their reason for existing. Furthermore, Elias continued, what percentage of those conquered worlds actually contribute meaningful resources to the Empire? All conquered worlds contribute. Do they? Because maintaining occupation forces, suppressing rebellions, conquering populations, that's all very expensive. Are you sure you're actually making a profit on this expansion, or are you just expanding because that's what you've always done? It was a deeply uncomfortable question, and one that Xylos had never really considered. The Empire conquered worlds because the Empire conquered worlds. It was what they did. You're suggesting we simply stop? I'm suggesting you think about why you started. What was the original goal of XY expansion? To secure resources and territory for the Empire, right? And have you secured sufficient resources and territory for the Empire? Xylos considered this. The Empire controlled over 2,000 worlds, most of them lightly inhabited or completely empty. Resource production exceeded consumption by significant margins. Territory was abundant. Perhaps, he admitted reluctantly. So, mission accomplished then? Time to declare victory and go home. It cannot be that simple. Why not, Admiral? What do you personally get out of conquering those 32 worlds? I follow orders. Serve the Empire. But what do you get? Promotion? Wealth? Satisfaction? Xylos thought about it. Conquering defenseless worlds wasn't particularly challenging or satisfying. The paperwork was tedious. The logistics were complex. And recently, he'd been having uncomfortable thoughts about the beings whose lives were impacted by XY expansion. Nothing, he said quietly. I get nothing, right? So why do it? Because it's what we do. Is that a good reason? And there it was. The question that cut right to the heart of everything. Was because it's what we do a good reason to conquer 32 worlds and disrupt billions of lives? Xylos looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him with expressions of confusion and uncertainty. They were all thinking the same thing he was thinking. Why were they here? Captain Thorne, Xylos said slowly, if we were to reconsider our current operation, what assurance do we have that human forces won't attack us anyway? Well, that depends. Are you planning to attack human interests in the future? I don't know. Fair enough. Tell you what, how about we make a deal? You turn your fleet around and head home, and we'll do the same. Elias's expression grew serious. If you decide to proceed with conquering those worlds, then we'll stop you, and it won't be pleasant for anyone involved. You're outnumbered. Are we, Admiral? You're detecting 300 ships in this sector. How many ships do you think we have in neighboring sectors? Xylos didn't want to think about that. If humans had managed to position 300 ships in this sector without being detected, they could have positioned fleets anywhere. Furthermore, Elias continued, what happens after this battle? Even if you win, and that's a big if, what do you think the galactic community is going to talk about? The Xylon Empire attacking a peaceful coalition that was trying to protect innocent worlds? The galactic community has never interfered with Xylon expansion before, because they were afraid of you. But Admiral, fear only works if people think you're invincible. Once you start losing battles, once people see that you can be beaten, that fear turns into something else entirely. What? Hope. And hope is much more dangerous than fear, because hope makes people do stupid, brave things like standing up to impossible odds because they think they might actually win. Xylos was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. The tactical situation was complicated. The political ramifications were enormous, and the philosophical questions were even more troubling. Admiral, Commander Valix whispered, we have our orders. The Empire expects. The Empire expects results, Commander. Perhaps it's time we consider what results we're actually achieving. Xylos looked at the main screen, where Captain Thorne was waiting patiently for his answer. The human looked completely relaxed, as if he were discussing weather patterns rather than the fate of star systems. Captain Thorne, if we agree to withdraw, what guarantee do we have that this coalition of yours won't pursue our forces? My word, your word, my word, and Admiral, I give you my word that if you turn around and leave those 32 worlds alone, no human ship will fire on your fleet. You'll be allowed to withdraw safely and without harassment. And in the future, if you want to talk trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation, we're all ears. If you want to conquer more worlds, well, we'll probably have this conversation again. Xylos made his decision. Commander Valix, signal the fleet. All ships are to reverse course and return to Imperial space immediately. Sir? Admiral, are you certain? I'm certain, Commander. Signal the withdrawal. Yes, sir. As the orders went out across the fleet, Xylos watched the human captain on his screen. Elias Thorne had not moved, had not changed expression, had not done anything except continue to sip his beverage and wait. Captain Thorne, Xylos asked, why? Why risk everything for worlds that aren't even human? Because it was the right thing to do, Elias replied simply. And because sometimes, Admiral, doing the right thing is more important than doing the smart thing. That's illogical. Completely. But Admiral, logic will only get you so far. Sometimes you need something else. Something that doesn't make sense on paper, but feels right in your gut. What is that? Elias smiled. And, for the first time in the conversation, it was completely without irony or calculation. It was just warm humanity. The withdrawal took 3 standard cycles to complete. Xylos's fleet reversed course without incident, and the mysterious coalition vessels faded back into sensor shadows as quietly as they had appeared. The 32 worlds continued their peaceful existence, completely unaware of how close they had come to conquest. Admiral Xylos filed his report as a tactical reassessment based on changing strategic parameters. His superiors were not pleased, but they were also not particularly surprised. Xylon expansion had been meeting increasing resistance recently, and perhaps it was time to reconsider their approach. Captain Elias Thorne returned to Earth, where he filed his own report and promptly took a 3-week vacation. His superiors were pleased, though they were careful not to make too big a deal of it. The last thing they wanted was for every ship captain in the fleet to think that facing down overwhelming odds with nothing but clever conversation was standard operating procedure. The coalition of ships that had appeared so mysteriously just as quietly returned to their normal shipping routes and commercial activities. Most of them were, in fact, civilian vessels that had volunteered for what their crews understood to be a diplomatic mission. None of them had been armed with anything more dangerous than standard commercial-grade shields and very large engines for running away quickly if things went badly. But the Xylon fleet hadn't known that. 6 months later, Xylos received an unusual package at his personal quarters. Inside was a bottle of something called Kentucky bourbon and a handwritten note. Admiral, thanks for making the right choice. Hope you find something more interesting to do with your time than conquering people. If you're ever in the neighborhood, look me up. I'll buy you a drink, and we can argue about military tactics. Captain Thorne, Starship Infinite Joy. Xylos stared at the bottle for a long time. Then he opened it, poured himself a small glass, and discovered that humans made excellent alcohol. The next day, he submitted a formal request to Xylon High Command for reassignment to the Diplomatic Corps. His request was approved. As for the 32 worlds that had unknowingly avoided conquest, they continued their peaceful existence, developing their cultures, raising their families, and creating art and music and literature and really excellent soup-equivalent dishes. And in the depths of space, human monitoring stations continued their quiet watch, ready to send a polite but firm message if anyone else decided that conquest was more important than conversation. Because that's what humans do. We stand in the way of bullies. Even when it's not smart, even when it's not safe, even when nobody asked us to. We do it because it's right. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, right is enough.